So this is the number 29th. It's on field engineering, and I'm super excited because it's a topic that I really love. But before we talk about this, who in the room know what field engineering is? Raise your hand if you do. That's very interesting. Actually, that's a good news because we have some people that are going to teach us what it really is. So who works in the people that know what field engineering is? Who work as field engineers? Who work as solution engineers, for instance? All right, we have some people. Maybe other names, solution architects? All right, I see a few. I see someone from Algolia. That's, let's say, sales engineer, maybe? Okay, this is super interesting because as you can see, there are a lot of different names for functions that are kind of similar. And the idea of field engineering is having one name, like I think in English the name is portmanteau, I'm not sure, but that brings together all the different names and start to think about it holistically. So about myself, my name is Michael. I am lead solution engineer EMEA at Algolia. I've been starting to be lead for roughly 2 months, so it's something I'm discovering and I'm trying to learn as much as possible about. So I am thrilled to have this meeting today, this discussion. But before we get started, I would like a huge round of applause for the 3 people that are going to join us right now. If you could come, please. Thank you very much. So there we go. So we have Steven, who is my boss, actually. We have Alexis Fritel and Malik Baudry. Thank you so much, guys, for joining here. So how about we start with a round of introduction. Alexis, do you want to tell us who you are, what you do, what's your background?
Okay, so let's make it short. So my name is Alexis. I'm working for Box. This is a SaaS solution, a cloud content management solution. I'm working for Box for 3 years, and I'm within IT for quite a long time, and especially working in a pre-sales organization for more than 15 years. So this is really something I started to, the role I took quite a long time ago, working for a company named iLog that has been acquired by IBM some years ago, working for EMC, and now working for Box. And now I changed my role as a manager for the pre-sales organization at Box for Southern Europe and Central Europe. And so I don't want to anticipate too much on the conversation, but okay, so my main focus is pre-sales, which is part of field engineering, I guess. So that's it.
Which is perfect, actually, because well, as I told you, I am also starting in this position, and so I have a lot of questions for you. So thanks for sharing this. Steven, what about you?
Sure. First of all, it's great to be here. It's great to see everybody. So I am from the Bay Area. I am a Silicon Valley story, I suppose. I grew up there and have spent about 25 years in the industry. Some of the early client-server solutions, all the way through cloud over the past 10 years. And so, yeah, I guess about me, in addition to all that, I've lived around the world and I've managed global teams. I was at Box for a while and at Salesforce and a bunch of other places. And I met my wife in Japan, and we have 3 kids, and we're in the Bay Area. And so I'm also, I lead a leadership institute for sales engineers, so pre-sales, so I teach workshops. And I try to look holistically at the role and as people. So I'm also a certified instructor on a course called Search Inside Yourself, which is originated out of Google. And it uses neuroscience and mindfulness to teach EI competencies for leaders. So really try to synthesize a lot of those pieces together, but I've had the privilege of working in a lot of field engineering roles, pre, post-sales, for many different companies. So I'm excited to share my thoughts on that.
Thank you so much. And also, just so that everyone knows, Steven flew from the US and arrived yesterday, which it's not super easy if you think about it, to be in front of people and sharing this when you're super jet lagged. So thanks, Steven, so much for that.
I'm Malik Baudry. I manage a couple of teams at Google right now in the technical solution consultant area. My two teams focus, one on the Google Voice Assistant, so the annoying OK Google. So basically, we help OEMs in Europe, all across EMEA, to put OK Google a little bit everywhere. So either you like it or not, but that's what we do. It's a lot of fun. And the second team focuses on making the mobile web better. So there's a new technology around mobile web, and we have a set of solution consultants that basically work with large advertisers, large publishers, to help them make the web a better place. A little bit more about myself. Born in France, engineering school in France, software engineering. I love networking, so I went to the US for 9 years, worked for a big networking company out there called Cisco Systems. And then I missed France, came back home here in Paris, moved from engineering because there was no way to do engineering, embedded software engineering back in 2009. There's not that many options. So I decided to move into technical consulting area. And as I was looking around, I basically joined Google first in advertising and now in a little bit more technical areas. And the journey is ongoing.
That's interesting because I see different themes that are kind of similar. There's this notion of traveling. Stephen, you've traveled a lot. Malik, obviously, you did also. You're an engineer, and that's also something that's part of field engineering in the definition, right? So maybe in the room, who is working as an engineer today that is not in sales? Okay, I see some people. So maybe pay attention because it could be interesting for you in the future. It seems like it's something that we do. That's also what I did. I just moved to field engineering a few years ago. But speaking of field, so when I asked the question at the beginning, not a lot of people knew what field engineering was. So how about you give us your definition, your own vision of what it means in your own company, in your own way. Maybe you can start if you want, Malik.
Yeah. So first of all, let me just explain a bit why I'm here. I was fortunate to know Algolia as a company. It's a company that I like a lot. I think doing a lot of innovation. I think it's a very interesting company. And I was fortunate to know someone from Algolia that basically reached out to me and said, hey, we're doing a tech lunch around field engineering. Do you want to come? And I said, sure, but we don't have field engineers at Google. And I've never seen field engineering titles at Google, which is a fairly large company. So I'm guessing it's more a matter of how you define it, because I'm sure we have the function somewhere, more than a matter of whether we have that role or not. So we hopped on a call, we started discussing, and then it was pretty clear that we had those functions at Google. So my vision of field engineering, which is a little bit the people that I manage, it's what at Google we call technical solution consultant. And this is a very broad term. So I'm going to give you 3 examples. So in my team, I have 2 technical solution consultants. I mean, 2 different type of technical solution consultant. One we call partner engineers. Those are the ones that take the Google Voice Assistant, help our external partners to basically take the product, work with their engineering team, embed the product, and take that product all the way through the test cycle so that it gets released on shelf in the different retail outlets that you can see out there. That's one type. So they go from pre-sales all the way to pretty advanced technical embedded software type of technical area, all the way to how you release the product, getting out there, discussions about discounts and so forth. The second type that I have is technical solution consultant around mobile web. There it's different. First, the technology is completely different. You're getting embedded is usually C, firmware, non-object oriented type of things. You're getting into the field of web where it's the opposite side. And there we work with very large corporate companies, and a lot of discussions are with how you convince the marketing to get onto this project so that you can align the engineering department. And then you have a little bit of technical work and you launch it. But there is no retail, there is no getting out. It's really more web where you put it on the server and it's everywhere. The third type that I can think of, which a lot of you are going to be more familiar with, is our cloud. In cloud, we have a lot of functions that are TSCs, Technical Solution Consultant, and we call them cloud engineers. We call them SC, Strategy Cloud Engineers. We call them Solution Architects. So like all those functions for us, and they span from pre-sales to deep knowledge of a specific area or broad knowledge of a given area, and help the customer to basically define the solutions. Cloud is a specific area where the post-sales is slightly different. I'm not going to get into that, but yeah, so that's basically how we define it at Google.
So just one quick question. So it's called technical sales consultant, the team you manage, right?
Solutions.
Okay.
We don't sell. That's a very key point.
Okay, sorry. And is there like non-technical one with the same title but without a technical word?
Yeah, so that's where it becomes a little bit. We said we wouldn't talk about it, but let's talk about it.
Sorry.
When we talk about TSCs at Google, we have TSCs that are very deeply technical and TSCs that are slightly less technical. And internally, they're on two different ladders. And the main difference, well, they're not exactly going to do the same role, obviously. They're not going to be positioned exactly the same way in how they interact with the partners and how deep technically they go with the partners. But one of the key differences is the amount of technical interviews that you're going to do when you want to join the company. If you want to join the O ladder, which is the technical ladder, then there would be coding interviews involved. In the other case, there won't be coding interviews as such. It would be system design interviews, architecture interviews.
Okay, very interesting. Steven.
Yeah, so here at Algolia, we have field engineering, and really it's very much an umbrella. It's an umbrella that looks at both the pre-sales and the post-sales, enabling partners, enabling the technology. And it's useful to think of the two words that I use to equate field engineering. If you ask someone on the street, what is field engineering? I would say that it's really about achieving technical success. And technical, I think we can all agree, it's being master of a domain, an industry, a product. Success, to me, implies an outcome, and typically an outcome related to a customer or a partner. So we're taking all that expertise and we're applying that towards achieving revenue in the pre-sales, right? Showing storytelling and solutioning and winning a deal on the pre-sales, leveraging our technology. And we have solutions engineers, is what we call them. And it's interesting. Some people like sales in their title. Some people, it's a very dangerous term to use if you don't want to be known as the sales orientation, or solutions, which would be really, again, focused around how do you put together your technology into something that is of value to a customer. So solutions engineers is our pre-sales group. And then once we actually bring on a customer, we have solutions architects, and they're really focused on ensuring a seamless transition to onboarding, that they're leveraging the Algolia technology, that they're bringing up their level of skill with using our technology. And those are, and they're also available for renewals, escalations, problems, and they're really focused in on how do we use this technology and leverage it internally within our engineering teams, and how do we bring that to market. And then we also have a services group. We call it Expert Services and Partner Engineering. And they're focused around how do we enable our systems integrators, our ISVs, everything, all the partners that work with our APIs or implement for our customers, and how do we make sure that we are going to market with them and that we're enabling them correctly. So I guess the term I would use, and API companies like Twilio and like Algolia tend to have a field engineering title to, at least at a point in time, to really encapsulate this customer journey from the point of first qualified contact all the way through the renewal. And then it evolves over time. I've worked with customer engineers at Google, and I've worked with lots of different roles that, again, focus on technical success as the key barometer, and what are they trying to achieve, in a customer life cycle.
I like that you mentioned the technical success. I think this is something that really drives the solutions, no matter if it's pre-sales, post-sales, where in the cycle we're getting in. So we want to ensure this technical success. And Alexis, I know in your case, you're really focusing on the pre-sales side. So maybe on the pre-sales, what would be for you the definition of a sales engineer or pre-sales engineer?
Yeah, in fact, at Box we don't have field engineer. Same thing as for you, Malik. And I would say when you are talking about field engineer, my understanding is more somebody I would say that is facing the customer with a technical background, And so this really also depends on the organization, the kind of products of services you are selling, if they are rather technical or they are more, I would say, for any kind of user, business user or consumer user. So then I would say each company has its own terminology. And in fact, I would rather see the difference, as, just to answer your question, from a role perspective, especially regarding, I would say, the customer cycle, starting in fact with pre-sales, with, I would say, the right people depending on the product. So it could be people with a technical background because this is a more technical solution or tool or whatever. It could be also people that don't have, I would say, a background as an engineer, but they are coming with a specific knowledge of a market, of an industry or whatever, but they are part of that process. And then you have also people that are in charge of the post-sales part. So I've seen you did a session for CSM, for instance, so which is very key for SaaS provider. But you have people from the support, I would say, the various level of support, depending on the products, they can have also a technical background. And of course, you have all the teams that is responsible of the implementation of the solution, either from a business perspective and from a technical perspective, with all those solution architects, implementation consultants, that kind of stuff. So, focusing on pre-sales, what is interesting is you may have people, I would say, with the same background as an engineer, for instance, but depending on, I would say, what they like to achieve, you know, what the ways they are considering the customer, they would take, with the same background, one direction or the other. And each company has a different organization. You may have pre-sales and post-sale under the same umbrella. You may have different organization for each of them. It can be also, it can depend on the geography. So what I can see is that focusing on pre-sales, you have most of the time people that are really, that they are not that much interested in, I would say, doing a project from A to Z. What they like is to have more short-term interaction, but with a lot of customer, with a lot of variety of people, of expectation, of requirement. That's the main difference. So, not sure I answered the question at the end.
It's such a broad question that I think you have answered beautifully, and thank you for this. So yeah, it seems, I hope this kind of answered the question I asked at the beginning, what is field engineering? As you can see, it's many things. It seems to come down to the notion of being technical, being in the field, so really talking to customers, trying to understand their pains, and trying to map them into solution, into technical solutions, really. So we've defined the role. I think it's interesting, but now each of you own a team, and I would be super interested in knowing how your team is structured. Maybe just high level, how many people do you have? What are you looking for in these people? Is there any sort of process that you have, something that we can see, how humans interact really with field engineers? I'll let you go first, Alexis, if that's okay.
Well, so my team is a small team. So it's 4 people and me. It's across different geography. So Southern Europe, Central Europe. This is a senior team. So, I mean, this is not people I have to manage. This is not micromanagement. They know their job. The idea is really, as for me, is to provide them the additional support they need to be able to achieve their goal, and also to be sure they are finding, I would say, the right journey within the company in short term and in longer term. This is one thing. And how to build that team, also what is key for me is really to be sure that I can have people with a different background that can work together as a team, but also with the rest of the organization, especially for pre-sales, because it's really key to be able to work with salespeople. These guys are interesting people, And you need to work with post-sales, you need to work with marketing, so you need to raise somebody that can work as in a various team, but also to work with the other pre-sales people. So this is the way it works.
And in terms of, so you talked about the marketing team or sales team, for instance. Does it mean like the sales engineer are paired with a salesperson and they work together, or does it work in more of a request approach to be assigned?
No, they need to work together. Really, as for me, I can see the pre-sales as one of the owner of the account. I would say almost with the same level as a salesperson. And I really try to avoid to have just pre-sales engineers seen as just a resource that is just asked and requested when needed. Of course, it's also a question of organization. It's also linked to, I would say, how much you need to industrialize your processes. It depends if you have to deal with a limited amount of large customer or with a huge number of small customers. It really depends on the organization.
Okay, that's extremely interesting. Just one quick question before we move to Steven is how do you make sure the sales engineer are not used as a resource? What do you tell your team to be really impactful and own the sales cycle?
Well, first, this is also a conversation you need to have with the sales organization, especially the manager, and with the sales, with the account executive. And what is key, for instance, is really to challenge these people because sometimes some could be a little bit lazy with the qualification of the opportunity. So it's really part of. I mean, you know, sometimes it's very, I would say, basic. It's you need to ensure that the pre-sales they will get the confidence from the salespeople, and because their main role is to be seen as a trusted advisor by the customer, but also by the rest of the team. And this is part of the manager really to ensure this and to avoid, I would say, any friction within the sales and pre-sales team.
And I'm really asking this because, so as for myself, I was a software engineer before I moved into field engineering. And that was a thing that was different for me when I started. I had no idea what sales was about. And when I had my first interview with Alexis, who is in the room here, he asked me, what is something you don't want to do? And I said, sales. I don't want to do sales. I'm an engineer, and that's all I want to do. So moving forward into the role, you need to start to really find your way. So that's a very interesting topic. Thanks for sharing. Steven, it's different for you because obviously you had the whole field engineering team. So how about you tell everyone how it's structured?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, we have 3 different groups, but I like to consider the baseline. We all share a common core, and that is mastery. That's what I like to use the term. But it's really mastery of our product set, it's mastery of how it's applied, and obviously that will change and evolve a little bit if I'm trying to sell as a technical counterpart in the selling organization, or if I'm trying to onboard and make sure the customers understand how to get the most from the technology and be successful, or if I'm working with partners and I'm working with the channel to help build business and to help our partners integrate. So with that common core, right, of technical mastery or industry product mastery, you then have the ability to look at any points along the customer journey and specialize. I'm a big fan of of mobility in general, and so folks who are maybe working with enabling partners a lot and working in delivering code may really enjoy the customer-facing piece of this and want to transition into more of a pre-sales role where they're working in a dynamic sales environment with lots of different salespeople and many fast-moving sales cycles, right, where they're not delivering, but you're really understanding, doing deep discovery, mapping solutions, and hopefully successfully getting a technical win, winning an opportunity. And so we maintain these 3 pillars because they're focused on different people internally as well as outcomes for the company. We all line into revenue at Algolia. So some organizations will have the post-sales that focus in on success and then map into the success organization. But we're really focused on ensuring that the customer outcomes are successful throughout the cycle. So just very quickly, the SEs, the solutions engineers, are typically mapped to a region and a number of account executives. So they really we derive our team resourcing around how big our sales organization and what our targets are and how we go to market and across the world. And we've got Europe and Asia and America. And then on the post-sales side, we work very closely with the customer success managers or the CSMs. And so we'll work very closely with them and map not only to how many CSMs we have, but how many accounts we have, how many renewals, how many onboardings, how much customer work is there. And then on XS, we really look at a combination of what partners do we need to support, how many projects can we sell. It's exciting at Algolia because we have a lot of enterprise interest, and a lot of times they want to use us exclusively or as a prime for implementing. And so that group really focuses in on what are our most important customers and how do we make sure that we are there all the way from start to finish to make them successful.
There's one thing you said which really resonated is this notion of balance. The idea that maybe one team will focus on trying to push, not necessarily selling, but at least being the person that's going to own the sales cycle from an engineering standpoint. But then we have a team that's here to implement. And I guess if you don't sell the solution that people want, then the team that's going to implement is going to be badly impacted.
Yeah, so managing transitions and also understanding this, if you have a complex solution, really upfront validating those pieces of the solution and they're mapped to the customer's requirements, what they really need to do, and making sure not only that you're documenting that, but that you're honest and authentic about telling the customer what they can and can't do and what workarounds exist for your solution. And we occupy this great role of being the trusted advisor, the honest and authentic voice of our solution to the customer. But what's really important, and what I've seen happen many times go wrong, is that we oftentimes use the term handover, which means it involves me passing the buck and saying, hey, I just sold this thing. Here, now it's your responsibility. And a best practice is really not to look at it that way, but to look at it as a transition. So the customer feels like their account team is growing, and we really look at it as, here are all the validations you've asked me for. Here are the things that we know we can implement. Here are some questions we're not sure about, and that we're going to need to work with the customer to ensure it happens. And we actually have a specific handoff process and a transitional process, and a set of internal and external meetings, just to make sure we're not making mistakes and upsetting the customer and having to give them free product or having them churn from us, but B, ensuring the customer is delighted, when they move into the real onboarding phase.
What's interesting is there are so many things and maybe words you even discover because the field is so rich. And thanks again for sharing this. I know, Malik, you're more on the partner side, but I think before you were not necessarily just on partner. Could you describe us how it's different to be working with partners and not necessarily just customers directly?
Well, for once, the key priority for us is customer success. And we do work with sales team. Well, we call them BD, but it's similar. But one of the key important thing for us is not how much revenue is going to be generated, or it's how the solution is good for the partner. Therefore, I see ourselves as almost a counterbalance, and I think this was mentioned a bit earlier, but we're here to make sure that in a very, very large company, you basically build a sales plan so that you can get your entire sales organization in one direction. And this may trigger a lot of good behaviors, and this may trigger some bad behaviors. In our case, because we're not aligned on that, we're the counterbalance of the bad behaviors, I like to see it. So for us, it's more, we get into a meeting, we see what's the customer need, and if the solution that's being proposed and sold to the partner is not the right one, we just come back to our offices and we say, no, we're not going to work on that. The way we control that ahead of time to avoid too many friction is that we define ahead of time the list of partners that we have a priority list of partners, if you want. So on the mobile website, we engage in Europe across EMEA with 300 partners, no more, and we will only get on those accounts predefined ahead of time. It's the same thing on the Google Voice Assistant. We know ahead of time the list that we've identified. So it takes a little bit of time to align across the different markets, make sure you understand the priority of the different markets, because you don't want to be in opposition all the time. There's a bit of balance there, but it's a lot about customer success, be the trusted advisor, repeated project, and so forth.
Okay, and so is a partner engineer going to like literally take their phone and call the partners to schedule things with them, or is that handled by something else in the team?
Yeah, no, we have weekly meetings with our partners,
Okay.
for example. Recently, one of our partners was struggling to coordinate with an ODM in China, so we organized a 3-party and went there as the trusted advisor to try to align things based on our experience. So, you know, it's a lot about how we enable them.
Did you go to China?
Yeah, we went to yeah,
Wow.
a couple of times. But yeah, so that's a lot about the partnership, how you help them being successful in launching their product.
Okay.
So it's a lot about that.
In terms of metrics, like if you need to think about key metrics that are important to your teams, what would it be for you, Malik? Things that you look at to know that a partner engineer is successful.
Yeah. So it's a topic that we discuss a lot. We at Google we define at the beginning of the year we define what we call OKRs. Those are the goals and what we want to achieve, and that defines what success looks like for us as an organization. And those will be aligned with what we think the partner success is. So on the assistant side, we are looking at how many, for example, we're looking at how many devices we're going to be able to enable. And in order to set our OKRs, we have a predefined list of partners that we aim at working with, and we build a relationship with them and try to build that partnership if the solution works for them. On the mobile web, it's the same thing. We know which partner we want to work with, so it's about how many engagements we've been able to do with them, how many launches we had, potentially how much we help improve the speed of their website, how many use the latest technology, PWA, and so forth. So there's different KPIs that are being defined.
These are quarterly, or is it monthly?
It's usually twice a year,
Mm-hmm.
the OKRs, because they are aligned with a perf cycle.
And who defines
At
these
some point,
OKRs?
They're trickle down. There's a very complex process,
Yeah,
top down, bottom up,
yeah,
and it's you know it takes about a quarter to define,
I see.
and it's valid for 6 months. So, but we do that every 6 months.
Got it.
But it's very important, at least from a top down standpoint,
Yeah.
because Google is not a heavy top down company, so you don't like the way I don't go to my team and say you need to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I go to my team and say, as an org, this is what we want to achieve. How do we best do that?
Mm.
So you need to get a buy-in. So if you don't take the time to go through that process and align, things go in a lot of different directions. So
Yeah.
even though we spend a lot of time on defining it, it's very important to ensure. So they trickle down from the top at a very, very high level, and then we map them and we align them locally to see how they map with the biggest, like the big OKR.
We also use OKR Algolia in general. So for the product, for instance, for revenue, we use this, and it's a very interesting topic. If you don't know it, I would encourage everyone to read on it. Steven,
You could write a book on OKR.
sorry?
You could write a ton of books on OKR.
So
you
there
can
are a
make
bunch
a
of
career
books.
on OKR. You know?
It's true. You can be an OKR consultant.
Yes, I guess I look at metrics in a couple of different ways. You know, the OKRs or the strategic alignment is something that is frequently missed, and the idea of getting people centralized around a corporate goal and then how they're going to stretch themselves to achieve it, I think is something that, again, we do at Algolia, and is really important to slow down a little bit and make sure that we're orienting ourselves correctly, so that the things that we do are in pursuit of that broader goal. And so that's really important. On the measurement side, obviously having 3 different groups, there's going to be a common set of measurement principles, and then there's going to be an objective set of metrics about, are we successful? So if we look at sort of a common, the common metrics of, a rapidly growing SaaS company is, do we actually have the coverage that we need to be successful? And depending on what group you're looking at, it could be in pre-sales, how many opportunities are in our portfolio, how many of them are active per SE. And then we'll look at what is the percentage of the business that we're covering, right? We want to be on most enterprise deals, but we want to look at only, there's a floor on SMB deals, for example. So we'll look at the coverage of the business and the individual workload. And that will happen usually with all groups. For expert services, we're looking at how many bids are out, how busy they are, or with SAs, how many onboardings are they doing, how many current cases are they doing. So first and foremost is you want to have some measurement about your plan of covering the business and how your people are doing. And it's not only for just achieving revenue or achieving success. It's also about understanding: do you have the right number of people? Are you burning out your people? Should you be hiring? Should you be re-optimizing it to make sure that people are happy, busy, not too much, not too little? And so once you have the baseline of some of those metrics that can work across the organization, my framework for looking at metrics is to create a hypothesis about why we're measuring something, because there's a lot of vanity metrics out there, and people have big dashboards with a bunch of stuff on them. And for me, the true test of a good metric is I could tell you that we're looking at competitive win rate, or we're looking at utilization, or we're looking at something, because I have a reason, I have a hypothesis about why it's important. If we're spending too much time in demos or in tech support or in some other part of the business, I use the metric to define how we could improve. And I'll communicate that metric, and we'll measure that metric and see whether we're right or wrong. And if we're right or wrong, we can then take action on it. And I like to retire metrics too. I counsel that you should have between 5 to 10 metrics completely for your whole organization, because if not, you're going to be like logging and reporting all day, and you're not really being a good steward to your team and using those metrics for the right reason. So there's a small framework that is useful to think about when you're building metrics. But I would also leave you with this: is in the absence of metrics, right, you're guessing. Right? In the absence of metrics, you may have data scattered everywhere, and you're guessing at it. And that's not really a good place to be when you want to be able to gather that data and understand whether you're right or wrong, and then to make change that's benefit for the business or for people's lives. So I'm a big fan of having a framework and using data to drive that decision.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Okay, I don't have that much data to rely on, so that's interesting. Yes, of course, I would say there are sales metrics, either for pre-sales and post-sales, but we all know this doesn't reflect really, I would say, the work that was done and the quality or the improvement that need to be done. And just clearly when you are pre-sales, of course, I mean, you are compensated on the sales, which it's great, but sometimes you can spend a lot of time and energy on an opportunity that you are not going to win. So it doesn't mean that you didn't your job in a good way. It just means that, okay, you are not selected. So of course we have OKRs, for instance. This is quarterly OKRs. Well, I think we can improve this sometimes. When you are talking about OKRs, it means also, as we mentioned, it's top down. It's also in the other side, and you need to be sure that everybody is leveraging OKR in the same way, just to be consistent and to be sure you get something from your manager. And so sometimes, especially when you are far from HQ, it can be more kind of challenge. But something that is really key, as for me, it's really peers feedback. I mean, from other people from the team, people you are interacting, the team member are interacting with. So sometimes what is difficult behind this is how to scale, of course. without having a too complex organization with too much levels. But for instance, what we can see usually, we have a manager if we are more than 8 people, I would say, roughly. So it's a way also to be able to have I would say, a tight connection with the people from the team. And also what I can see as a way to measure is that within the pre-sales organization, we have also many opportunities to see how people are involved in other topics that only, I would say, support the sales team and be the technical owner of the sales process. It could be, you know, how to have knowledge sharing or to take some initiative on a larger scale. And this is a way also to measure. It's not based on data. It's more based on, in fact, I would say my own feeling or the one from my manager. So this is the way it works.
Okay, I'm super interested by the last part you said also, this notion of knowledge sharing. Is there something, so how does it work? Let's say someone is in your team and wants to know more about the product. How did the person do it?
Well, knowledge sharing is something I'm very sensitive to. And you were mentioning the transition from pre-sale to post-sales, but there is also a potential of knowledge sharing between post-sales and pre-sales to get project feedback, for instance, to have the same kind of interaction with CSM, you know, to always improve your storytelling, to always be able to be more accurate when you are talking to the customer, talking about what real customers are doing. So sometimes you can change things a little bit, but it's so. This is one aspect of the knowledge sharing. It can be on other purpose. It can be a technical topic. It can be a business topic or whatever. So to really, I would say, industrialize this it's not always that easy. It's also a question of tool and where are you trying to find the answer to your question, where you can, I would say, work on a specific topic, identify what are the experts of that domain and interact with them. So it's a question of, I would say, organization and be sure that people are sharing this. And it's also a question of tool for us, for instance, in that case, our main tool is we are using Slack. This is really the entry point when you need to find something. Everything that is around conversation is in that tool. Everything that is around document is in Box. So both are integrated, so it's fine. So this is really, I would say, the main source. Okay. And it's a way to make connection with people, because at the end, it's also key to build your network to execute faster.
I feel like if we don't know the product, if we don't have this knowledge, then we don't bring so much, even as a sales engineer, because that's what we're here for, right? And so it's interesting that you mentioned that it's important in other orgs as well. I guess we're in between so many things. We're kind of this glue sometimes between different teams. You mentioned the transition. So just so that everyone knows, I guess whenever we sign a deal, the pre-sales person is going to take this deal and hand it over to another team that is going to be handling it. At Box, how does the process look like?
Well, it's really, it depends. What we try to do is to involve consulting before, I would say, the signature of the deal, because this is part also of the sales process. So it's very often we can have a CSM or a project manager in a meeting just to explain, okay, what the roles are and what will happen after, I would say, Box has been selected. Sometimes it's also key to, because these people are the right people to answer to some question. Okay, what kind of support I will have? How are you handling a project? I mean, what are the resources you need from me as an organization to have a successful deployment and implementation of the product? So it depends of course, on the availability of, of that team, on the size of the opportunity. But usually we try to have it starting earlier. And then as a pre-sales, we have what we call a backlog, which is all the topics we have identified that can be linked to specific technical modules that require a specific work from the consulting. And this, I would say, is one of the documents that an AC need to fill. Sometimes it's not the case, of course, but this is key.
You said, is it so? This transition phase, does it happen even before a deal is signed sometimes, or?
Well, it can happen. It also depends on, I would say, the office and the geography. Because, for instance, here in Paris, we are lucky to have all the roles in the office, so we are very close. So, I mean, the communication is very easy. It's also because we are not a big team in Paris. But, for instance, if I compare to my peers in Germany, they are very distributed around the country, so it's different. In London, it's a very large office, so it's different also. So it's, I would say, it's case by case.
Okay, fair enough.
So of course, you try to have some recurrent processes, but it's still different from one place to another.
Yeah, and I know Stephen can tell more about this, but we're also in this moment where we're trying to rethink about the way handover works and the interactions between the solution engineer, the CSM, the solution architect. So at Algolia, how do we want to think about this transition?
And I noticed how you went from handover to transition. We want to remove handover. Again, it gives that sense of, oh, here we go, I'm passing this over. So as we look at transitions and augment these account teams for our customers, yeah, I think it always needs to be looked at, and depends on the type of product that you have. The two terms that I use to easily define these two domains are very simply stated, the what and the how. Right? If in the pre-sale, we're really focusing on what they need and how our solution is going to map what they need. Now, many products like Algolia, where it's an API and where we're talking with engineers right away, we're going to talk about the how as well, right? The architecture, how we load data, how do we index it, how do we operate on it, how will you be successful with it. But it's useful to think about those two domains because we're really, to get them to a decision, we're telling them what is possible. And we're painting a picture of the future with them, and we're giving them some idea of how. But once we get to the point where they sign or they're committed, we really now need to shift into how. How should their teams be aligned? How are we going to align? How are they going to use the technology? You know, where to avoid, where to go, where to work around. And so it really shifts into the how, and the architect is really, the post-sales team is really focused on that. And then as far as the transition meetings, right, those will evolve as the types of customers you work with evolve, and as your process, you get bigger and you work with different types of customers and get bigger in the organization as well. So a number of different meetings, internal, external, a number of different tools as well that need to be leveraged to make sure you're not losing information along the way.
I really like this what and how, because it's kind of simple, and I think it defines well what a solution engineer does and what a solution architect does. So yeah, thanks for sharing this. For you, how is it? Yeah.
So I can illustrate a little bit. So across advertising, mobile web, or assistant, there's no transition because the person handles it from the pre-sales to the post-sales. And advertising is a huge business, but no matter what, this is the model where you kind of get rid of the transition problem. The transition problem right now, if you look at Google's business, it's really around the cloud, all the cloud deals that happen. And there, the way things are structured is that there is an org that is dedicated on pre-sales, the customer engineers, the strategic customer engineers. They're basically working on defining the what. As they're defining the what, you actually start defining the how as well. Because in order to migrate your workloads onto the cloud solution, it's not something you can easily do by yourself. There's a planning that comes in place. You either go through channel partners, or you use professional services within the company. And that the post sales would be the professional services are the team that is basically handling the post sales. So as you start defining the how, so the team that does the pre-sales start defining the how, the post-sales team is involved in defining the how and verifying the plan for the how. And then if the customer basically goes with the professional services, then the team that define the how is going to engage in making it a reality.
Who coordinates all that?
So the teams are organized in tripod.
Okay.
Well, so there is elements. So each sales is associated with a customer engineer, which is associated with a strategic cloud engineer in order for them. And there is dedicated time that is like the post-sales engineer has dedicated, well, theoretical dedicated time to basically spend on pre-sales as well, to be able to verify how what's the plan that is being defined. If you're not familiar with the professional services offering, it's a bit hard to to follow, but there's basically different phases in the post-sales, and one of them is going to be, really going through the transition with the partner, and that's part of the first phase of defining the how.
Okay, you mentioned customer engineer.
Yeah.
So what is that?
Customer engineers, they are basically involved with, so the way the cloud team are organized, there is the sales, the field sales representative that's basically selling the solution. He's teamed up in a tripod with a customer engineer. This customer engineer is defining the technical solution alongside the sales person for that specific customer.
Okay.
And this is a TSC. This is a technical solution consultant.
Got it. Okay.
So
yeah, everything. I can see the links in between all these acronyms. Cool. Super interesting. One question that I would have for each of you is, so let's say you're looking to hire a solution engineer, technical sales, solution consultant, whatever the name we choose to give it to that. What are the top qualities that you're looking at whenever you're interviewing people, Malik?
So we use the technical solution consultant title because it kind of summarizes what we're looking for. We're looking for people that can understand technology, that are able to apprehend new concepts and basically apply them, that are technicians, and at the same time can be consultant. And when you look at the consultant, it's a lot about the soft skills, what we call general cognitive abilities, leadership, how you deal with ambiguities, all those kind of things. Therefore, hiring process is really oriented around those two things. 2 interviews are technical, and usually 2 to 3 interviews are evaluating the general cognitive abilities through scenario. Typically, you have an issue with your teammate, how you handle that. It's not going to be that we're going to describe the issue, but walk us through what you do next. Walk us through how you behave. You have a partner that is really upset, comes to you with this request. What do you do? So we're trying to really evaluate how people handle those cases because we need them to be consultant and build that trusted relationship with our partners.
I see. For you, Steven, is it?
Yeah, many levels. At the base level, as a hiring manager, field engineers are made, they're not hired more often. A lot of you here today are thinking about what is field engineering and all these many different roles. And it's hard to find you guys. And it's hard to recruit and find passionate individuals that want to join these groups. So on one level, as a recruiting manager, there's sort of basic minimum requirements, right, that are just standard for any given role. But more importantly, the 4 things that I look for, one is intelligence and curiosity. Right? Curiosity is my favorite adjective right now, or and noun. If you're curious, it's an opening into thinking about what a situation, solving a problem, talking to a CTO, talking to an engineer. So on one level, you've got intelligence and curiosity. It's coupled with work ethic. All right, not afraid of hard work. Get in there and grind. Have some grit. Also, looking for prior success. And by that, I don't mean actually that you've been a sales engineer and you're great at a sales engineer. It means that you've shown in whatever it is, whether you know, started a small business in college and were successful at it, or run Ironman triathlons, or you know, were great. You went to a great school and did an amazing thing. It's having the behavior of success, because what you do in the past is usually translatable into where you're going to go. And so those three things, and there was one other. It'll come to me in a sec, because I was getting focused on success. The main thing is that you're looking for potential, right? And because the role is interesting and diverse, you have this opportunity to find people from many different backgrounds who want to explore this role and this function and be successful. Now, on top of just sort of what we look for, it really, the last one is coachability, right? Coachability is really important, because if you're not really thinking, you know, I've been in the industry 25 years, but I love learning. It's one of the most important things for me. So I'm always open to coaching and want to do better and learn. And many people with that attitude can really learn anything, and they apply themselves and can take that feedback. Above and beyond all of that, you know, there are very well-known competencies that are really good for technical selling roles, right? How consultative are you? Are you innovative? Do you have a focus on a revenue or an outcome, right? Because that's the kind of role that we're asking you to do. So there's different layers that we would use to sort of evaluate people's velocity in an organization and how quickly they advance in an organization. But I guess I'd leave you with those pieces of it.
Thank you so much. What about you, Alexis?
Yeah, I fully agree with you. So always focusing on pre-sales. That's true that curiosity is really key, and the ability also to communicate with the customer. You know, to first, I think that you need to somehow love people, because you want to listen to them, and also to be able to explain to them what kind of value you can provide to them. So it's really key. And of course, you don't need to have a pre-sales background. Can be anybody, but these are key. You will be also a salespeople, so you need also to, I would say, to agree on you know, when I first started this. Not when I started, but some years before, I was a developer, and for me, you know, sales, it was, I mean, this was never a word I was saying. You know, it's like it was another planet, and at the end, I was so happy to take that role, and I also discovered selling as something that is very exciting. Even if it was not my first motivation, it was more to interact with people, to understand them, and to come back with a solution and something that will bring them value. So this is one thing. And what I would add is also you are going to consider what you need in your team. You need first, when you are pre-sales, since you are interacting with a lot of people, you need to think about it. Okay, how this person will fit into that team. I would say that the large team, I would say salespeople, but also other pre-sales, and even marketing or whatever. So this is one thing. And it's a question also of personality. And also you are going to think about your own team, how you want to build it. You don't want, I would say, the same as you have. You don't want a clone. Yeah? You want maybe somebody that is coming with a different background in order to balance all the knowledge and the background you have within your team. And also something, you need also somebody that is coming with something that is very specific, that is unique, I would say. That will provide a new way of seeing things, a new experience to share, a new knowledge. So that's part of the process also.
All right, thank you so much. So I think we're running out of time. So thank you all for sharing all this with us. This is really awesome. And thanks everyone for coming to this Tech Lunch. I think we might have someone that has a message.
Question?
Oh, yes, perfect.
Hey, hello. Thank you very much for those interesting discussion. I might have a quite different topic. It's just 5 minutes. Here at Algolia, we always want to improve our product, and we do a lot of user testing and interviews. So you will probably have a follow-up email after that event, and you will find a link in that email to register to user testing in the next coming days. If you are interested, you're not obliged to, but just to warn you that if you'd like to be part of the adventure and to do research with us, we'll be happy to count you in. Thank you.
So actually, we do have some time for Q&A if anyone has questions, of course. So any question in the room? Yes. Let's see if we can catch it. There you go.
Got it. This one is for basically you, Steven, but whoever wants to reply it, you can. I would like to know how you mentioned the success, and I would like to know if you have a team dedicated to measure that success, and if so, how is it connected to the field engineering team?
So I guess the question is, do we have a team that's focused on the measurement of the success and operation?
Defining and measuring the success.
Yeah, well, at Algolia we don't have a specific, dedicated operations or success person. We do work with our sales operations and business operations team that will help us to define and report and measure both OKRs and metrics. So I've typically found organizations that are at that size to have a team, a relationship with the operations team to define and measure. And as you get bigger, if you're very heavily into the operations or success and metrics of the team, once you get to a Google size certainly, or even a Box size, where you'll need to really focus in on fine-tuning that, you can look to bring some of the operations in-house. I will mention, though, that readiness and enablement is something that is really important to get out ahead of early, on the earlier side. So enablement can be intimidated when they have to train very technical people. So at least owning the thought process around how do we make sure that we're training and enabling everybody and then the organization around us, that's something even on the earlier side that I would look at to make sure that you have in place. Did that answer your question, or?
Yeah, kind of, yeah.
Anyone else?
Thank you. Does anyone else have any question?
Thanks. Yeah, you talk about owning the sales cycle as an engineer. How do you enforce that in your organization, and how you enforce that sales doesn't own the cycle only? Yeah.
Okay. I can answer this. Yes, owning the sales cycles, I would say from a technical perspective. Yeah. So the sales is the owner of the account, of course. He's leading the strategy, and there is a technical part in that sales cycle. So then you arrive to what we call usually the technical win. And really the idea is also to own this. It means it's not only, I would say, to be reactive, also it's to be proactive. So of course this is something you are learning. When you first start with that role, you don't know about it. And this is, I would say, the responsibility also of the manager to coach you on this. And it's also the responsibility of the account manager to be careful about this, because you may miss, I would say, some key decision maker or technical steps you need to go through, and that can jeopardize, I would say, the deal or delay the deal. So I would say this is more an objective, but the idea is at the end also to feel, I would say, committed and to feel responsible of this account. I would say even after you did the deal, and this is where the transition with the consulting or the CSM also is key. And And I would say this is also very helpful for yourself, because knowing what has happened with a customer is a way also to get some feedback and to improve your storytelling, your knowledge about the product, about the business of that kind of industry, and then in order to be more relevant when you are talking to prospect. And this is very interesting because you are learning so much thing. I mean, it's every day.
Thanks.
I think that was very articulate. The other thing that I ask my sales engineers to do is to look at the fit and quality of an opportunity. So as part of being the technical counterpart, the technical strategy and getting the technical win is to understand how well our solution will fit, to uncover risks, right? So risks to our solution fit or risks to where we're talking into account. It's a really important voice for the sales engineer to work with the account executive. I did work at Box, and we did have, in early days, we had very different opinions. The account executives and the sales engineers had very different opinions. And when you put the two of them together, you got a real good look at where we really were on a deal. And so having that proactive opinion and calling out where the good and the bad and maybe the ugly is on an opportunity is a really important way for a business, to predict and to be accurate about what's really happening on a deal. And also, our job is to be authentic, transparent solution people. So how that moves on into customer success is also really important too.
Yeah, well, for us, with the scale we have, a lot of it goes through the clear definition of R&R, role and responsibility. It's really rare that a salesperson would be able to close a deal or close a partnership without a technical person. And it's part of the responsibility and each of the role to basically make sure that this relationship works. On top of that, it's very important in Google culture that people work together. It's actually an emphasis of our perf as well, where if you're not someone that can easily work with the others, you're unlikely to be very successful in the company. So we put a lot of emphasis on helping each other and making sure that this works. And finally, we have a lot of feedback loop a little bit everywhere where I'm going to be aware of a lot of the deals that are happening and how things are going, and people are going to reach out to me if things don't go the right way. And they usually don't need to escalate. We don't really consider that escalation as such because part of the culture is to make things work. But it's a little bit of all that makes the alignment work.
Does anyone else have any question? Yeah. Oh, you can stay here.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you all for sharing all those insights. My question was regarding the content, and I mean, all those people, they need to have materials, either technical content or marketing content. And so I was curious about how do you communicate, what sort of content do you need, who's doing it, and what works well and what doesn't work?
It depends about the maturity of the business you're looking at. Same thing, we have a lot of different businesses. So when the business are pretty mature, you have almost an entire team that's basically dedicated of generating content. Pitch deck that you're going to customize, pre-sales deck. I mean, so everything is going to be out there. The narrative, the story, there's dedicated team working on it. When the initiative is a bit smaller, something that you're basically starting, then actually, like in my team, for example, like the Google Assistant, we generate a lot of things by ourselves. We talk to the product, we kind of develop the best practices, and we improve our decks over time and our pitches and so forth. And then depending on the maturity, you get a mix of in between. You get a little bit from the central team, you generate your own central repository, everybody sharing, emails, newsletter, links, internal websites, I mean, just regular. We do a lot of trainings, hangouts on there, or training sessions whenever we think that there is a scale to do so. And we try to build on best practices. Part of the culture is to share, so we really influence our teams to basically share best practices. If you've seen something that works, make a nice use case out of it. It's not about you just trying to shine and get credit for what you did. It's about letting others know what's made this partnership or this deal successful, and then learn from it, and hopefully everybody can improve collectively.
Yeah, I would echo what Malik said. And I would also advise that enablement is something you want to be intentional about early, because you'll get so much organic content. It's all over the place, and there's so many interesting pieces of information. But how do you actually deliver it so that those groups that need it get it in time and relevant to what they need? So many organizations that I've worked for, enablement is hired too late. And what happens is there's so much information, and every net new person you add on, or a new product comes out or something comes out, and you don't have the mechanism to really consume that information, you can gain really great economies of knowledge and centralization and utilization by looking earlier at that piece of the business. And even if you're just taking some people part-time, but they're comped and they're OKR'd and they're focused on bringing it all together, that will go a long way too if you are not going to commit full time to that. But there's generally so much great stuff, and we need to curate it and deliver it, and so we want to be intentional about that.
When you're talking about content, you mean I would say all the presentation, demos, or whatever that will support your role? Yeah. Okay. Well, you need to be effective. Don't spend too much time on it. So especially when this is my case, when you have a product that is changing every month, you can't reinvent everything. So you have to rely. What we do is to rely on what is provided by the corporate. And sometimes you need to do some changes, especially because for instance, when you are selling in Germany or in France, you need some translation. So you have. This is most of the time what we need to do, because it's not always provided by HQ. And so this is ready to find the right balance. Don't try to invent too much things. But if there is something that is really relevant, share it in order to avoid people to reinvent it in the same way. So that's all what I can say.
Any other question? Yeah.
Thank you for your talk. I have a general question. Finally, why using field engineering title instead of solution architect or sales engineer? Are technology companies these days looking for multitasking engineer, like as full stack, instead of specific expert?
Yeah, I think we're the only field engineering that they're using that label today. And I would say that it just evolves, because underneath field engineering we have 3 different roles. So if you will, field engineering is just a way for us to look at how we're going to leverage our teams to provide success across that whole journey as it's defined. This is actually the first time I've had the title of field engineering, but I've actually managed groups across the whole board in various roles at different times. So I think that it's just like all the names change, whether you're a solution or a sales consultant, whether you're a customer engineer or a field engineer, the principles and the specialization of those roles are the same. What I like about field engineering, running that group, is it just does provide flexibility for people to do great work and continue to evolve skills that may apply across a broader set of interactions. So I may be a solutions architect, but really decide I love being in front of the deals, I love closing the deals and transitioning them to a post-sale. And so even as I specialize in my current role, I have some easier mobility to the other dimensions of what field engineering does. So I think it's field engineering has come up maybe over the last 3 to 5 years only. And so it's a way to capture a certain set of functions and a certain set of common principles to multiple groups. But if you ask me 5 years from now, where will field engineering exist, or will it be customer engineering, right? In a SaaS world, where I was thinking about this. Everybody is a customer of Google in some way, right? And so customer engineers are a really good way to think about it, because if the world is your customer, you are there to help engineer growth, right? And so it may change. But to answer your question, I think that it's a good way to look at a set of functions, a set of specialties right now in the industry, as we work out what it means to be in a subscription model universe, and to look at a point of longer continuity with a customer. And moving forward, I think the individual roles will continue to be valuable. What we name it may evolve. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, so generally we go to multitask peoples than specific skills these days.
So field engineering is the umbrella, right? It's finding out where people who are interested in field engineering as a whole, may initially want to focus, right? Whether you want to be revenue driven, onboarding and go live driven, or code delivery and ISV, deep technical support. And so across those, we would work with individuals to identify their previous skill sets and where they want to go. And then as they grow, they have opportunities to experience the different disciplines within field engineering.
I have a question. Thank you for the talk. So as engineer, you have technical background, and you're also on the field in front of customers. I believe at some point you build somehow an opinion of what the product should be in few months or year, how you can see the customer needs and how the product answer or no to those needs. What would be the influence of the field engineer on the roadmap of the project? Do you have a way to give your feedback to the engineers and evolve the product on the direction that you think is the best for the customers?
I have a lot to say on that. Yeah. Actually, Malik,
A short answer, yes. But the larger the organization, the more patience it takes to actually get on the roadmap. That's how I would put it. But it's definitely a very important part of the role, in my opinion. So when we say role and responsibility, to me, I'm looking for people which understand what are the limitations we have today, understand the requirements of the partner, are able to bridge that so that we can work together now, and then define a good strategy on how we're going to influence engineering. And if you're close to engineering, it's easier than when you're a little bit away. So that's when you look at global companies like Google. A lot of the engineering not sitting in your geographical area, that becomes a very interesting and lengthy process. But that, to me, is pretty much like playing a chess game, where you basically strategize around when is the best time to ask for it. How it should be phrased. Do I need to find other partners? Do I need to make the requirements much bigger? So there's a lot of thought process that goes into how we get that. And to me, that's one of the highest satisfaction, is when you've been able to get it for your partner, and then you're able to deliver it with your partner. Because it's not an easy thing to do realistically across very, very large products, where sometimes some of your partners that seems to be locally very important, in the grand scheme of things, they are not that important in order to prioritize a feature. So it's definitely part of the role, and it's one of the most exciting parts. And that's what I like about the role, having all those interactions between sales, external customer or partners, and then the engineering internally. And by engineering, we mean PM or Eng directly. And we have even more function there, so it's even more complex, but it's what makes it really interesting.
Yes, same thing. The answer is yes. So definitely, in my case, the organization is very different because we have a single product and we are a small organization. So yes, I think the role of field engineering is key. Either people are involved in pre-sales and post-sales because they know the customer and they know what the customer is expecting. So that feedback is really key. I would say they are not driving the vision, of course, but they are really they, I think they have the best understanding of what the customer are doing with the product. Of course, there is everything you can measure, especially with the cloud, globally, which is adding an additional key feedback. But yes, the role is really key. But it needs to be organized. So of course, I think you can't have each individual reaching out the engineering and the product leader about this and this. And you know how it works. It must be always related to, I would say, the impact from a sales perspective, how to measure it, and which has some limitation, because also you need also to enhance sometimes the vision. So that's not always that easy.
Great answers, you guys. I would just compliment that and say you want to. It's one of the best roles as a field engineer, and it needs to be programmatic to grow and scale, and to it not be emotional and be around. I have to win my deal, and I need this feature. And when it's done right, it becomes maybe one of the most important feeds into the product organization. I've seen this happen multiple times, and what happens is it then becomes a very measured input into a product roadmap exercise, and you can even establish relationships with product that's much stronger and collaborative, so that product, when you're feeding information around the quality and the gaps of your service, or enhancement requests, or even potential future areas of development, they're able to respond back to say, we are doing this, we're putting this in roadmap, we're not doing this, and you actually have a better mechanism to communicate those things to your customers and to your prospects. So when it works really well, it becomes this important loop that gets closed between the two organizations and becomes a real way to create maybe the most important feed of the customer into the product development cycle. It doesn't happen automatically, it takes work. But again, it's one of the great programs and great joys of getting this right in an organization, is really having that influence and having that bridge between the two organizations.
Thank you so much. I have personally learned so much during this discussion, so thanks for sharing all this. We're going to stop there. If you still have questions, come to us and we'll be super happy to talk about it. Thanks everyone for being here, and I hope to see you soon.